On May 21st, 1918, the French capital shuddered with heavy explosions. The Parisians were in panic. The sky over the city remained clear, and the noise of airplanes could not be heard. But consistently, a new shell fell on the city every quarter of an hour. Later, upon analyzing the fragments from the craters left by the explosions, it became clear that these were not bombs dropped from ultra-high-altitude German dirigibles, as had initially been thought, but instead artillery shells. Paris was under fire from a never-before-seen long-range gun. At that very moment, 75 miles away from Paris, the German army deployed a unique weapon of gigantic size, the Kaiser Wilhelm's trumpet, which later became known as the Parisian gun. It was an ultra-long-range, long-barreled, 210mm gun on a rotating carriage. It weighed 564,000 pounds and was 92 feet long. The gun complex was mounted on a specially built railway platform because there was simply no other way to move such a giant. The shell of this gun, weighing 265 pounds and being about 3 feet long, was capable of reaching 80 miles. The gun was aimed in such a way that at the top of the flight, the shell reached an altitude of over 25 miles. Flying in a rarefied layer of the atmosphere extended its range. It reached Paris in just under 3 minutes. Each explosion from this gun shook the land within a 1-mile radius. Its size was so immense that it turned its use into a real logistical nightmare. Each shell required a powder charge weighing 400 pounds. The detonation of the charge was so strong that it constantly wore down the bore, increasing its inner diameter, so each subsequent shell had to be slightly wider than the previous one. Moreover, the gun barrel itself, weighing 304,000 pounds, could easily bend under its own weight, so it was supported by a special cable system. And although the shells reached Paris, the accuracy of fire was very mediocre. At best, the shells landed somewhere in the city area. There was no question of intentionally hitting a particular block. Shooting at such distances required special skills. For spotting, they even had to take into account the Earth's rotation. Therefore, the unit was serviced by a special detachment of sailors, each of whom had experience with long-range naval weapons. The huge amount of money and resources that have been spent by the German leadership to create and use this gun was not fully realized. The Paris gun did not bring much benefit. But some military experts say that the Germans still fully appreciated the capabilities of their guns, and the shelling of Paris was intended to exert psychological pressure on the French rather than cause serious damage. After all, at that time, an unexpected attack from the enemy without warning, without the ability to counterattack, was something incredible, and it could easily suppress the morale and faith of the French in their strength. During the entire time of the shelling, the Paris gun fired between 300 and 400 shots. In addition to the various instances of destruction to infrastructure, 900 Parisians were affected by the shots. As a result, the French could not find the cause of their troubles, although they were searching in all districts and neighborhoods of the capital. They could not believe that the shooting was conducted from such a great distance, because at that time, such a weapon capable of such a thing did not exist. Except for the Kaiser Wilhelm trumpet. Soon after the beginning of the Entente Forces' attack in August 1918, the gun was taken to Germany, where it was destroyed in order to avoid capture by the enemy. But the story of the giant gun did not end there. Two decades later, the military leadership of the Third Reich became interested in the drawings of the Kaiser Wilhelm trumpet's developments. The aptitude for Everything gigantic and powerful prompted Adolf Hitler and his closest military assistants to create something even more gigantic and incredible than the Paris gun. And they succeeded. In 1941, the world saw the largest and most powerful railway artillery piece in history, called Dora. Moving along rails, Dora, weighing almost 3 million pounds, looked as if it had walked out of the pages of a science fiction novel. The length of the barrel was 155 feet. The width was 23 feet, and the height was 38 feet. A shell weighing 15,000 pounds, or about the size of 3 passenger cars, flew out of a giant barrel over 105 feet long. The explosion from the gun was so strong that the range of such a super heavy shell was between 22 to 27 miles. The power of the shell itself was impressive. The ammunition penetrated armor with a thickness of 3 feet, concrete floors with a thickness of 23 feet, or a layer of soil with a thickness of almost 100 feet. The number of crew members to service this giant was a record 250 people, who had to spend 54 hours in order to place the gun in operational readiness. Moreover, approximately 4,000 more people, including the military, were involved in servicing the artillery gun crew itself and deploying the Dora to position. The very preparation of the firing position was no less impressive. The location for the gun deployment was 15 miles from the target itself. In 1942, the unfortunate fate of being shelled fell to the city of Sevastopol. The preparation of the position took place in the strictest secrecy. The area was guarded by military police and 300 soldiers. Air protection was provided by fighters and an air defense division consisting of 400 people. Another 500 fighters of the chemical division were engaged in setting up a smokescreen. The access roads, firing positions, shelters for staff and guards, and a deployed field bakery were also equipped. The final stage in preparing the position and servicing the gun itself was the installation of a barrel weighing 880,000 pounds. Dora could attack. The first shot had the effect of a small earthquake throughout the area. In just 6 milliseconds, 2,200 pounds of powder was burned, which ejected a shell weighing 15,400 pounds at a speed of 3,280 feet per second. Windows were blown out by a sound wave within a radius of several miles. The sound of the shot was heard over 20 miles away in Sevastopol itself. A total of 48 shots were fired, of which only 5 hit the target accurately. The accuracy of this giant turned out to be one of its main drawbacks, not taking into account the logistical nightmare that it caused for the sake of its exploitation. A year after the creation of Dora, another copy of it was released, which was named Heavy Gustav. But neither it nor Dora materialized the time, resources, and money that was spent on their creation by the leadership of the Third Reich. Eventually, in 1945, when the combined army of the anti-Hitler coalition entered the city of Bavaria, it discovered the remains of this superweapon, which had been blown up by the Nazi army in order to avoid its capture. The attempts of the Third Reich to achieve complete military superiority were not limited to grand operations. Ambitious and often insane projects also covered the airspace. And even when the war was coming to its logical outcome, and it seemed that Germany's defeat was inevitable, the leadership of the Third Reich did not abandon desperate attempts to change the outcome of the war with weapons that could give them an advantage in the air. Thus, in 1944, the German aircraft manufacturer Focke-Wulf presented a design project for a new experimental vertical takeoff and landing fighter aircraft, the Focke-Wulf Triebflügel. This project was an attempt by Luftwaffe executives to test the possibility of creating a fighter aircraft that would be able to take off from the shortest possible runways, and ideally, it would have the ability to take off vertically. The result of such hopes was the project of an incredibly avant-garde aircraft design, with 3 rotating wings, at the end of which jet engines were to be installed. During takeoff and landing, the wings acted like helicopter rotors, and in horizontal flight mode, they worked like a huge propeller. The weight of the Focke-Wulf Triebflügel was supposed to be 11,400 pounds, and the maximum speed was estimated to be 620 miles per hour. With the possibility of vertical takeoff and landing, this project was very promising. Its creation and application could partially solve problems with runways because, in theory, it would have to take off and land in limited space, such as forest glades or building roofs. This made it less vulnerable to the attacks of the Allies on traditional airfields and would significantly expand the capabilities for deployment and operation of the Focke-Wulf Triebflügel itself. With its unique ability to take off from almost any open, unprepared location, it was supposed to be the ideal aircraft to intercept enemy bombers and protect important facilities. However, the Focke-Wulf Triebflügel only reached a detailed design study and wind tunnel tests. Due to its novelty and complexity, the project remains unrealized. But the next incarnation of the idea of vertical flights was so grandiose and fantastic that the Allies could assume that German engineers could not do without secret alien technologies. This project was known by the codename Haunebu. It involved the creation of disc-shaped aircraft with jet engines and vertical takeoff, resembling UFOs in appearance and possessing serious advantages over classical aviation. It was so secret that its development was under the control of the SS rather than the Luftwaffe. The project of the device Haunebu 1 was prepared by July 1941. The current model was assembled and tested at the end of 1942, while inevitable design flaws were found. That was quite naturally due to the originality of the tasks being solved. Further work led to the creation of a more successful model, Haunebu 2. It was said to be capable of carrying between 8 and 20 people on board and had a disc diameter of 85 feet to 105 feet. Although the second Haunebu model impressed Adolf Hitler, he still required significant improvements to this project for the absolute reliability of the flotillas, the development of which was heavily funded. Thus, the third model was developed, Haunebu 3. The Germans managed to create it only in one copy, since the device was more serious than the previous 2. One of the tasks of Haunebu 3 was to fight from the air against naval targets. For this purpose, 4 270mm caliber gun turrets were allegedly installed on the experimental disc. The diameter of the disc was approximately 230 feet. The SS command noted with satisfaction that the Haunebu 3 type apparatus implemented the latest achievements of German engineering and technical thought. Without reliable and officially confirmed sources about these flying discs, we cannot find out exactly what characteristics they had, or even if they existed at all. But based on the scientific and engineering data that we have now, we can assume that these projects most likely related to helicopter discs with an internal rotor. The devices of the Haunebu series had an air intake in which the crew cabin was located. A turboprop engine was located under the input device, rotating one multi-blade rotor or 2 coaxial rotors of opposite rotation, which provided thrust for takeoff and further flight. Such a disc-shaped aircraft would theoretically be capable of gaining a horizontal speed of no more than several hundred kilometers per hour. Hitler's penchant for gigantomania also affected the Haunebu project. As a continuation of the series, the model Haunebu 4 with a diameter of almost 400 feet was planned. There were preliminary sketches and detailed development of the project planned for 1946. According to them, it was supposed to be a heavily armored aircraft, with the ability to conduct air combat with several opponents at the same time. It is not fully known whether such flying discs actually existed or whether there have been any attempts to design them at all. But based on the technological superiority of Germany at that time, German scientists' genius, and the crazy ideas of Adolf Hitler, it can be assumed that such projects could still exist in theory. But what was really true was the high demands and sometimes impossible tasks that Hitler set for his military engineers. And with the entry of the United States into the war, the Führer's ambitions in terms of creating new weapons only increased. The difficult situation on the battlefield, namely the inability to transfer military operations to the territory of the United States, forced the Third Reich to begin developing weapons capable of causing heavy losses to the Americans on their own territory. As a part of this goal, in 1943, the aircraft factory Arado began to develop a project for a long-range jet bomber called Arado E-555. The main purpose of the project was to bomb the east coast of the United States from the territory of France. For this purpose, in 1944, the necessary requirements for a bomber were stated, namely, the ability to carry at high speed at least 8,800 pounds of bomb capacity at a range of more than 3,000 miles. According to calculations, these requirements were achieved by installing 6 BMW 003A engines. The dimensions of the Arado E-555 were impressive. Length, 63 feet. Wingspan, 77 feet. The maximum speed could be around 620 miles per hour. The aircraft was only half completed. The capitulation of Germany did not allow the engineers to complete it, but even if the project had been fully completed, the launch of such a unique and technically complex aircraft into a production series would have taken a huge toll on the German economy, which was already not in its best position at the end of the war. But Arado E-555 was not the only plan of the Third Reich to attack the territories of the United States. Even at the beginning of World War II, knowing full well that a clash with the United States would be inevitable, German engineers were already preparing weapons that were truly incredible at that time. It received the codename Silbervogel, and was a project of a high-altitude, partially orbital bomber spaceship. At that time, it was the world's first detailed design of a hypersonic aircraft and an aerospace system. The main task assigned to it was to bomb the USA, in particular New York, and the distant industrial regions of the Soviet Union, namely the Ural and Siberia. The length of that silver bird was supposed to be 92 feet, based on the drawings, with its own weight of 22,000 pounds, and a fuel tank that was supposed to hold 185,000 pounds of fuel. It was assumed that the runway for Silbervogel would be almost 2 miles, where the aircraft could be able to accelerate to a speed of 745 miles per hour. This would allow it to rise to an altitude of 90 miles above the Earth, that is, into the thermosphere, and travel there at a speed of 8,500 miles per hour. Then, the Silbervogel had to turn off some engines and descend, drop a bomb weighing almost 900 pounds over the target. Then the engines had to be restarted to rise to an altitude inaccessible to enemy aircraft, and airports located on the Pacific Islands captured by Japan were planned for refueling. The ambitious project never went beyond the drawings and calculations and was cancelled in 1941 due to the lack of necessity for its immediate implementation. The difficult martial law that would soon overtake Germany forced it to finally abandon the crazy idea of an orbital bomber forever. But not all of the ambitious projects of the Third Reich within the framework of aircraft construction remained on the drawings. Some of them still took the skies. Horten Ho 9 was an experimental turbojet aircraft of the flying wing type. The development of this project began in 1931 by the Horten brothers. The appearance of the twin-engine flying wing is due to the belief of Walter and Reimar Horten that this is the most effective scheme for a fighter aircraft and any other aircraft in general. Like most educated aircraft designers, the brothers understood that success was behind an aerodynamically clean airframe. In addition, the brothers also knew how to make their engineering unit as fast and efficient as possible. So they came to the conclusion that it would be most rational to use a jet engine instead of many powerful piston ones. In 1945, the aircraft underwent the last key tests before launching into mass production. But during a high-speed test where Horton Ho 9 managed to show 500 miles per hour, the engine failed on approach to the aerodrome, and the aircraft caught fire and burned to the ground. Because of this, the development project was not completed before the German capitulation. At the same time as trying to achieve air superiority, German engineers were simultaneously working on the creation of other unique and incredible weapons that were to play a key role in ground military operations. German engineers tried to create the heaviest armored and armed tank in the history of mankind, and they succeeded. In November 1941, at a meeting in the Reich Chancellery dedicated to armored vehicles, the head of the Tank Commission, Ferdinand Porsche, received instructions from Hitler to create a new heavy tank. The Führer's design to create super heavy weapons was not baseless. First of all, it was due to the results of studying captured samples of Soviet armored vehicles, which, together with the intelligence information received, led the Wehrmacht command to believe that by the spring of 1943, the Red Army would receive a new generation of heavy tanks. Hitler wanted to get ahead of the Soviet Union and surpass their technical achievements in terms of tank construction. The tank project was named the Panzerkampfwagen 8 Maus. In the process of development, its mass increased significantly to 330,000 pounds. And there was a persistent tendency to its enlargement. It was supposed to become a weapon capable of breaking through any fortified enemy positions and withstanding the impact of any projectiles from any ground guns. As early as the end of 1943, German designers from the company Krupp did almost the impossible. They managed to create the heaviest tank with the maximum possible armor protection in the shortest possible time. On December 23rd of the same year, Maus began its first field trials. The characteristics of this giant are still striking. It weighed an incredible 420,000 pounds and had a length of over 30 feet. The width was 12 feet. The thickness of the armor was over 200 millimeters, which made it practically invulnerable. Moreover, Maus did not have hatches or openings in the frontal and aft armor parts, which could significantly reduce the anti-discharge resistance. A 128mm gun was chosen as the main armament, and another 75mm auxiliary gun with a 36 caliber barrel length. An attempt to equip the tank with a flamethrower unit was quite exotic. During the discussion of the options, it was decided to put one flamethrower in each of the left and right parts of the rear plate. The range of the flamethrower was assumed to be 330 feet, with an expenditure of 33 litres of fire mixture per second. According to preliminary estimates, the installation of the flamethrower units would cost an extra £11,000 of combat load. However, after carefully studying the designs of the flamethrower units, it was decided to abandon them due to their higher vulnerability. The running tests were relatively successful, although not without problems. The tank moved off the road without any issues, although swampy areas should have been avoided. Fuel consumption was incredible, with an average of 350 litres of fuel per 6 miles. By the end of 1943, there could have been a very real opportunity to launch Maus into mass production, but the successes of the United Army of the anti-Hitler coalition on the battlefield finally buried Hitler's tank-building ambitions. Only 2 samples of this tank were built. One of them was fully ready for combat activity. It was even included in the forces that guarded the German General Staff. However, the tank's combat career got off to a rocky start. Its engine broke down, and the steel giant stopped so suddenly that it was impossible to use Maus as a firing point. Therefore, the crew decided to blow the tank up. Another serious challenge for Krupp, which at that time was the largest manufacturer of military vehicles for Germany, was the project to create an ultra-heavy mine-sweeping ship, which was named the Krupp-Rheima S. Mined fields with anti-personnel or anti-tank mines appeared to be a serious obstacle for the attackers. There were cases when minefields broke up a well-thought-out attack. The development of special military equipment that could fight mines was fraught with great necessity. But even here, the Nazis' predilection for everything gigantic made its own adjustments. And in 1943, at the head of the Third Reich, an ultra-heavy minesweeping ship was introduced, the Krupp-Rheima S. The engineering unit consisted of two modules that were connected by means of a hinged joint. The front module housed the crew. The transmission elements were located in the center and the power plant was located in the stern. The second module was executed similarly to the first one. The size of the Krupp-Rheima S was amazing. Its length was 46 feet, and its height was 10.5 feet. Weighing 286,000 pounds, the minesweep could develop a velocity of 15 miles per hour. The diameter of the wheels was 8.8 feet. Such gigantic dimensions entailed a number of disadvantages, because of which the minesweeper did not meet expectations. Transportation of Krupp-Rheima S under its own power to the mine clearance site was impossible due to the size. It was disassembled into the component parts and they were transported separately. After that, it was reassembled. Because of its enormous weight, the minesweep was constantly stuck. Besides, its impressive dimensions made it an easy target for the enemy. And although the armor was powerful, it did not save it from even small caliber shells, and not always and not everywhere from larger caliber machine guns. The ambition of the German leadership during the two world wars was on par with the genius and inventiveness of German engineers and scientists. Many of the weapons that they managed to create were of a revolutionary character and influenced the further development of military and scientific technologies around the world. So, what German-made weapon did you find most amazing? Or maybe you know about some other weapon that we haven't mentioned in this video? Write your thoughts in the comments. And that's about it for now. Subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss anything, give it a like, and thank you so much for watching.